Hello and welcome to another edition of the Terrace Scottish Football Podcast. My name is Craig Anderson and I'm joined by my good friend Ewan Taylor.
Hello, Craig.
And we are continuing our series of the laws of the game. And today we are going to talk about Law 4, which is the player's equipment. Is that one you've got a lot of strong thoughts on, Ewan?
No, I mean, it's a bunch of woke killjoys that don't let cool, like, fancy Dan number 10s wear, like, necklaces and such like.
Exactly
It's
that.
sad.
But no, that's how it is. But what we're going to do is we're going to share this again, and you'll hopefully see this on your screen nicely. And we are going to talk through Law 4, essentially. And Law 4 is all about the players' equipment and what they should wear. And it's all, it's kind of centred around safety. And so part 1 there is saying a player must not use equipment or wear anything that is dangerous. Now that's obviously quite generic, but it does give some examples there. And it's saying that any jewellery whatsoever is forbidden. And you shouldn't be able to use tape to cover your jewellery. Do you remember, Ewan, because I do, any notable incidents of jewellery being a controversial topic relating to Scottish football?
Scottish football?
Or like a Scottish club, anyway?
No.
So when Hearts got to the Champions League in 2005-06, they played Ike Athens, I want to say, and Julian Brelli was sent off in that match, and the first yellow card he got was for wearing an earring. So the referee basically obviously spotted at some point during the game that he was wearing an earring and he got booked. And then he subsequently got his second yellow and Hearts kind of collapsed at that point in the match and were knocked out of the Champions League on the basis of someone wearing some jewellery. So it does happen. But the interesting one there, I think, is particularly around rings. A lot of people can't take their wedding rings off, and obviously you probably do have players who wear rings. And I think this is a kind of official rule, and it'll be all taped up if they have to. But you're not meant to be able to wear that. But I don't think, I'm not sure what you're meant to do if you can't take your ring off. Clearly, there is some leeway typically given in reality, but it's an interesting one. But yeah, you used to see players wearing earrings and stuff a lot. But obviously, with earrings, it's mainly for their own safety, so that they don't get their ears torn off. And for things like rings, it's in case you obviously catch someone in the face with it when you go up. Otherwise, you'd have guys wearing knuckle dusters and all the rest of it. And then we've obviously got rubber bands mentioned there, harking back to the Lance Armstrong Live Strong days where everyone was wearing these rubber bands. So that's kind of just around keeping players safe. And then you've got players being inspected before the start of the match. So before every game, the referee will go into their changing room and check stuff, check their equipment, but also check the studs on their boots and make sure that they're not sharpened, make sure that they're all safe. I mean, as a referee, I used to go into the changing rooms and look at that, but I'm like, I don't really actually know what I'm looking for, but you're just kind of, it almost felt like a ritual as much as anything.
You know when you see it, I suppose, if someone has blades stuck into their literal blades.
And likewise, but the point is, you go into the dressing room and do that, but then the players then go out onto the park 10 minutes later and could have done anything in between. But you also check substitutes at the professional level anyway. If a sub's coming on, the assistant or the fourth official, we'll go on to which of them do it, will check the players' boots and stuff like that to check they're going on. And if a player is... and that's interesting because that's obviously a potential a bit different from what I spoke about with Julian Brelli. If a player is wearing something unauthorised or dangerous, the ref should ask them to remove the item and to leave the field of play at the next stoppage if they can't remove it straight away. And it says that a player who refuses to comply or who wears the item again must be cautioned. So it's like I've told you and now you've still got that earring and there's a yellow card, which I don't think is what happened with Brelli. So perhaps that's changed in that amount of time. That was obviously the best part of 2 decades ago. There is some compulsory equipment on a football pitch, which most of us who watch it will not be surprised about. Players have to wear a shirt with sleeves. So where did that come from?
Cameroon.
Yes.
Sure.
And Cameroon are responsible for 2 of these explicit rules, So Cameroon tried to propose a World Cup strip that didn't have any sleeves and were told, no, you have to have sleeves. And they also had that one-piece kit that they spoke about using, but now it's required that a shirt and shorts are separate. You have to have a shirt, you have to have shorts. You also have to have socks. And then you get into the minutiae. If you have any tape over your socks or you have anything else that's round about your socks, then they have to be the same colour as the sock. So why do you think that is, Ewan? I don't know if you...
I suppose that would be if you're trying to make a decision over who touched the ball or who maybe fouled somebody else, if socks actually help a referee in working out.
That's basically it. I don't know how much that actually helps, but that's I mean, it's not something that I think you consciously would pay attention to, but potentially subconsciously it's helping your decision making. And referees will be looking at stuff like that. It's the same reason why clubs typically don't wear the same colour of socks when they're playing against each other, I suppose. And then shin guards.
There's that the hot topic with Richard Keys at the moment, with the people cutting the back of their holes in the back of their socks. Yeah, he's keen on that being outlawed, but it doesn't seem to be at the moment.
Several Kelly players definitely do that at the moment. Shin guards are required, so you do have to wear shin guards as a player. That's obviously for your own safety. And it says they must be made of a suitable material to provide reasonable protection. Obviously quite vague. And but obviously you're not having shin guards made out of sponge cake, for example, because that would be pointless. But they need to be solid, and they need to be covered by the socks. So there's nothing about a maximum height on them. And obviously you did used to see players with their socks rolled right down, and you can see their shin guards. You're not supposed to do that. And footballers have to wear footwear. Again, we're stretching further back in international football, but are you familiar with the example of a team not wanting to wear footwear?
Early World Cup, perhaps.
Yeah, I think it was in 1950 World Cup that India qualified for, and their players didn't want to wear shoes. I think they did wear tape around their feet, and that was kind of what they did, but they were basically told they couldn't wear that. They had to wear footwear, and they didn't play in the World Cup. I think it's been exaggerated over time that wasn't probably the only reason. I think the World Cup was being held in Brazil, and the travel would be expensive, etc. as well. But they do have to wear footwear. There's nothing really specific about the footwear in that part of the law, but you have to wear something on your feet. So you could wear trainers, you could wear whatever else. And there's a famous story from involving our two teams, Ewan, which was when Kelly beat Rangers 3-0 at Ibrox in the Dick Advocat era. Christoph Kokard, the urban myth, the folklore around that is that he forgot his boots and he had to wear a pair of Astros in that game. However, I was at a work event where I actually was sitting next to the referee who refereed the game that day. I can't remember who it was now. I want to say John Underhill, but it was someone like that. But anyway, I was chatting to him, and I don't know. I think he maybe even mentioned that I was chatting to him about that, and he said, "Oh, I remember that game." And I said, "Oh, this is the story." He's like, "Nah, there's no chance that happened. I wouldn't have let someone play with trainers in the." And then when I actually have watched back, because after that I was like, I wonder if he's right. I watched the footage back, and you can actually see in the highlights that he very clearly does have proper studs in his boots. So not true, sadly, but a good story nonetheless. Goalkeepers may wear tracksuit bottoms. That's the Gabor Kirayi rule there. You don't see that so much nowadays. You used to see it a lot more.
No.
But
always a sign of a dodgy keeper, in my view.
Yeah. You never saw Buffon cutting about in trackies, did you? And if a player's footwear or shin guard is lost accidentally, they must replace it as soon as possible. But if they keep their shin guard on, or and I think there have been a couple of examples of a player with their boot in their hand doing something. If they play the ball and score a goal, the goal is awarded. It's not a foul or anything. But as soon as the ball goes out, you do have to fix it. So that's some interesting stuff on what you can wear. Coming on to colours, and I kind of touched on that earlier, to distinguish yourself from each other and the match officials. So the referee, the two teams all have to be wearing different colours, and each goalkeeper must also be distinguishable from them. Sometimes you see examples where that's maybe not strictly the case. Obviously, the two goalkeepers being different is generally not a big deal, but I suppose you have the example potentially that a goalkeeper could go up for a corner, and you don't want them to both be wearing green strips, for example. but it does say if they're both the same colour and they don't have a change, the ref can allow the match to be played.
There was an example, I can't remember if he forgot his top or if the top they'd brought was the same colour, but when Rangers played Parma in the Champions League qualifiers to bring Buffon back up, Buffon actually ended up wearing a Rangers goalkeeper top, but rebrand with like the Parma brand on it, because they had to have something else distinguishable.
I think that's something that happens occasionally. There was a World Cup game in the Argentina World Cup where someone ended up having to wear a club shirt from one of the Argentinian clubs. I want to say it was in Netherlands. Ended up having to wear like this green and white striped strip that was from one of the local clubs. And there's definitely an example. I think of a Renfrewshire derby where one of the clubs had to wear the other team's away strip and then won heavily wearing it. I think it was Morton wearing a St Mirren away strip, but I could be wrong with that. But you do get it does happen occasionally. And then we have information about undershirts. Undershirts, another thing you don't see as much of as you did 10 years ago. But your Under Armours and all the rest of it.
Yep.
But if you have an undershirt, then it's supposed to be a single colour, which is the same colour as the sleeves. So that again, there's not all these mad colours going on, which you did used to see for a while in the kind of mid to late 2000s, and the pattern or colour should be the same, or the pattern and colour should be exactly the same as the sleeve, and the same if you wear undershorts or tights, those have to be the same colour as the shorts or the lowest part of the shorts, and if you are in the same team, you have to wear the same colour as all your teammates. So some not pointless, but it's kind of for the same reason, a bit over officious, but all of these are basically example driven, because there will have been an example where the referee's like been trying to referee a game and you've got 20 different colours of undershirt on the pitch and it starts to get a bit confusing.
Yes.
Anything else on equipment? This is all about kind of non-dangerous this is all yank nonsense. Protective equipment, headgear, face masks. Although Robbie Dees had his face mask on and couldn't get it off quick enough when he scored the equaliser for Kilmarnock against
There's a real raft of face masks wearing this season in Scotland.
Yeah. Well, Callum McGregor had one last season as well, didn't he?
Danilo, Balogun, and I think Balogun's not actually played with it on yet, but he's been training with one. And Alistair Johnson. Obviously, Alistair Johnson's one being something that should probably be, there should be a law passed that Alistair Johnson specifically has to always wear a face mask. But
that's a few players, but
yes, particularly him. But yeah, there's been a few this season.
So yeah, these kind of face masks are obviously fine. They're allowed, and you're allowed knee and arm protectors made of soft, lightweight, padded material. Coming back to the Argentina World Cup, I believe before the 1978 final, in a bit of mind games, one of the Dutch players was playing wearing a cast on his arm, and the Argentina players complained about like the safety of it and basically were at it in gamesmanship. So these things are obviously, you wouldn't want a guy with a full-on Stuckey being able to play, because that would obviously be a bit of a challenge. Goalkeepers are allowed to wear caps, and there's not really any restrictions on that. But if players wear head covers, and we're generally, I suppose, talking about Muslim players here, they must be, or Sikh male players, I suppose, as well. They must be black or the same colour as his shirt. And again, all the players in the same team have to wear the same colour. They have to be in keeping with the professional appearance of the player's equipment. Don't know what that means. Like nothing wacky, I suppose. Not attached to the shirt and not dangerous. So yeah, basically, if you're wearing some sort of head covering for usually religious reasons or other reasons, it has to be safe. I suppose there were snoods as well, weren't there? That was a bit of a fad at one point. A fad, and again, could have been a strangle hazard if they'd not been done properly. Electronic communication is not allowed. You see it in like American football that they're allowed to be, all the quarterbacks are all. There was a period, I don't know if they still are, but they could all be mic'd up and stuff like that. That's no longer allowed. And football's never allowed in football. Team officials are allowed to communicate with each other via electronic communication for player welfare or for tactical reasons, but again, only small things, not big enormous broadcasting equipment, I suppose. So there was a bit of a spate of that, especially over COVID, where the manager would be at home watching on the TV.
I just remember the Mark McGee story. Do you remember that one?
Yes, I was about to bring that up, but yeah, you tell it.
When Mark McGee, he was basically ended up watching the game on clearly what was clearly like a dodgy stream. So by the time he was like, "Oh, we're putting," I think Rangers were winning 1-0 at the time, and he was like, we're still in this, right? I'm going to phone the bench to tell them to make this up. And by the time he got through to the bench, it was already 2-0.
So yeah. It's not the ideal scenario. No. We've obviously Jose Mourinho was infamously involved in a particular form of electronic communication when he was not allowed to. Because I think in UEFA competitions, if you're banned, you're actually not supposed to be able to do this either. But how they manage that, I don't know. And if you are using unauthorized electronic equipment as a coach, then you will be sent off. Good. A law that I'm sure is used regularly. Yes. And tracking systems and wearable technology are allowed if you want. So like all these, because now these players are wearing these kind of
sports bra things.
Sports bras that have got all that equipment in them. But it has to be ensured that it's safe, and the data it's a match and competition organisers who are required to make sure that it's reliable and accurate, and FIFA are on board with all that. And then finally, we're getting towards the end of this one. Slogans, statements and advertising. Equipment must not have any political, religious or personal slogans, statements or images. So players shouldn't reveal undergarments that show political, religious, personal statements or any advertising other than the manufacturer's logo. And you can be sanctioned for that. Obviously, the most recent example of that, I suppose, was the rainbow armbands at the World Cup, when the captains of several European nations shat it. Having said they were going to wear these rainbow armbands, then didn't, because they were threatened with sanctions. In reality, those sanctions would never have happened, but they were obviously just looking for, in my opinion, an excuse not to do it. Obviously, like, this stuff is obviously, you understand why there's a rule against it, because otherwise people could put anything on there, but obviously there are often valid reasons for political protest, and I think the rules exist and are often kind of
because you obviously see
not followed, I suppose.
You get that, I suppose the bad end of the scale was, like, remember, Nicholas Bettner had his Paddy Power pants or something.
Yeah.
So I mean that's pretty rubbish.
It's not the worst end of the scale, because I think we've had people supporting far right organisations, but
that would be worse. That would be worse than Paddy Power slightly, depending on how your gambling's going. And then there's things like, when Iniesta scored in the World Cup final, and the message for the boy that died, Daniel
Jarque, was it?
And I don't think he got booked for that. I don't know if he did. But
you'd hope not.
You'd hope not. But I mean, technically, you should have been.
Everybody got booked in that final, so probably you got booked for something.
Howard Webb had lost the plot by that point. So maybe that, but that just the things like you think that should obviously, and then there's even like the Robbie Fowler dock workers thing going back about 30 years ago now. So feels like it's a bit of a restriction of speech, but you can definitely understand why FIFA would be very keen on this. Sometimes it's fair enough, but other times not so much.
These things apply to all equipment worn by players, but you are allowed number, name, team crest, logo, initiative and slogans promoting the game of football, which is quite generic, respect and integrity, and then advertising. So you can make a political statement as long as someone's paid for it, basically. And for example, the UEFA game, like UEFA for all their games at the moment, are displaying peace in English and what I assume is Russian. That's obviously a political statement. That one's permitted. It's basically, if they say it's permitted, then it is. and these should be confined to the shirt, front, and armband, and might only appear on the captain's armband. But the referees are required to take note of the laws of the game, like the other laws of the game, when deciding whether to take action for these things. So, are they using it in an offensive, insulting, or abusive manner, or a provocative, or derisory, or inflammatory way? And if it is, then they're definitely not allowed. But statements or images relating to any persons living or dead are not supposed to be allowed. Any local, like political parties, governments, organisations which are discriminatory, which is vague. Any organisation whose aims or actions are likely to offend a notable number of people, which basically means any organisation at this point, whether they're doing good or like including like UNICEF or anyone good as well, and any specific political act or event. So there's obviously a few going on at the moment, but this obviously, I guess it came up with poppies when Scotland played England. Both FAs were told not to wear poppies and decided to do so and got fined, I think. Clearly that will offend a notable number of people, but you could also argue it's not, like it's culturally insignificant to those countries. So there's all that balance there. The sensibilities of the opposing team should be carefully considered. So this is like the most political part of the laws, I would say, full stop, actually, in terms of what you can and can't wear.
You can foresee with some games coming up for the Scotland women's team around Israel, and I don't know, Israel have got, I don't know, in fact the World Cup groups haven't been drawn yet, have they? So for the men's World Cup,
but they do have a playoff for the Euros as well coming up this month.
Well, I mean, and if they were to make that tournament, you could foresee quite a lot of discussion.
I suspect UEFA will be hoping they don't. How far they will be going to hope they don't, I don't know, but I suspect that they won't be. They will be keen for them not to qualify. Okay, so what happens if you break any of these rules? Play doesn't have to be stopped, and the player is instructed by the referee to leave the field of play to fix it, and the player leaves when play stops, unless they can fix it without leaving the field. And then that player has to have it rechecked before they can re-enter play, and then can only re-enter with the referee's permission. So if it's a game where it's only a referee on the park, then they obviously, or indeed just assistant referees running, which will be in all the lower leagues. If you get kind of go off to fix your equipment, you're not going to get back on until a stoppage of play, because clearly all three officials have to do their job. If there's a fourth official, they can obviously check it, and you can potentially go on once it's fixed. And if you come on without permission, then you get a yellow card, which we've already spoken about. And if play had to be stopped to issue that caution, then it's an indirect free kick, and we'll get on to all that type of stuff later on. So that brings us on to a small number of questions for you, Ewan. So, a player left the field of play to correct or change equipment, then returned during play without the referee's permission. What is the sanction and the restart?
So the player would be booked for that, because you're not allowed to come onto the park. Play would be stopped, and then a free kick granted to the non-offending team.
Yes, with the exception, because I glossed over that, it could be a direct or an indirect free kick, whether they interfered with the game after coming on or whether they didn't. But yeah, you're right. A player has accidentally lost their footwear and then scores a goal before the ball goes out of play. Is the goal awarded?
Yes, you said that earlier, so I'll...
Yes.
Yep.
And a player is wearing or using unauthorised or dangerous equipment or jewellery. What is the referee's decision?
Tell them to take it off, and then if they don't take it off, then it's a picking.
Yeah, and presumably if they then also don't take it off, it would be a second one. But yes. And if they're unable to, then that might count. So I wonder if that was actually the Brelly situation. I wonder if he couldn't take it off, and so he got booked. I don't know exactly what happened there. But as I say, it was nearly 20 years ago as well. So that brings us to another one of the riveting laws of the game here. They're still worth talking about, but obviously we are aiming towards the ones that are actually more debated and more talked about. But that was Law 4, the player's equipment. So thank you for listening to this one and join us again for Law 5.